I never thought a text could make my hands shake, not after everything I'd been through. But there it was, blinking on my phone screen like a small, electric dagger. We need to talk about the loans in your name. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of my apartment in Chicago, the skyline sparkling under the morning sun, pretending the world outside had nothing to do with the chaos inside. My silk blouse brushed against my wrists, soft and expensive, and I clenched my fingers around the mug of coffee that had gone cold. $72,000. That was the number tattooed in my memory. The money I had trusted her with.
My mom.
Overnight, she vanished, taking not just cash but pieces of my trust, my security, even my sense of who I was. And now, almost a decade later, she, or whoever she had become, was dragging me back into a past I had meticulously hidden. I should have felt panic. Instead, I felt this strange mix of exhaustion and ironic amusement. Of course she would show up like this. Of course the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how many layers of success and independence I build over it. I sipped my coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste, and whispered to no one, "You really don't know who you left behind, Mom." I was 22, freshly graduated from the University of Michigan, full of dreams I couldn't yet name. My mom, Patricia, had always been magnetic, the kind of woman whose smile could light up a room, but whose words could cut sharper than any blade. She had this way of making me feel like every achievement of mine was borrowed, never earned. I still remember the afternoon I handed her the envelope with $72,000, every penny saved from part-time jobs, tutoring, and internships. My hands had trembled, partly from excitement, partly from the nervous weight of her judgment. "Keep it safe, honey," she said, her voice soft but firm. "No one can be trusted with your money like I can." I remember nodding, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. Her smile was warm, convincing. I believed her. I wanted to. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, the envelope hidden in her safe as she instructed, imagining the freedom it would bring. The money was a symbol of independence, my first step toward a life she didn't control. I thought of the bracelet my grandmother had given me before she died, a silver chain engraved with her favorite saying, "Never trust love that costs you your peace." I had laughed then, not realizing how prescient it would become. The next morning, everything collapsed. I woke to an empty apartment, the safe door wide open. My mother was gone, and so was the money. At first, I couldn't process it, staring at the empty space in disbelief, the metallic scent of the safe lingering in my memory. When I finally called her, the line was dead. Weeks later, I learned the truth. She had forged loans in my name, leveraging my trust and turning it into a weapon against me. I cried. I raged. I felt foolish for trusting the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally. But more than anything, I felt a fierce, simmering determination. That bracelet, the words etched into it, flashed in my mind, and I clenched my fists. I would find a way to reclaim not just the money, but my life, my dignity, and the version of me that no betrayal could ever break. After the betrayal, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. For a while, I existed in survival mode, sleeping on a friend's couch, working 2 jobs at once, and staring at the piles of bills that weren't even mine. The forged loans hung over me like a storm cloud, and the shame gnawed at the edges of every conversation. But somewhere between the heartbreak and the exhaustion, a small ember of defiance flickered. I refused to let her or anyone define the rest of my life. I started taking small steps. I signed up for evening courses in financial management, teaching myself the kind of practical knowledge that could protect me from people like her. I networked relentlessly, reaching out to anyone who might offer guidance. That's how I met Mr. Reynolds, a seasoned financial consultant with a sharp mind and a soft spot for underdogs. He saw potential I hadn't dared to recognize in myself. "You're smarter than most people who have a head start," he told me one night over stale coffee in a 24-hour diner. "Use that. Don't waste it waiting for someone else to fix your mess." With his mentorship, I began building my own small consulting firm, taking on freelance clients and pouring every late night into growing my knowledge and reputation. The beginning was brutal. I battled self-doubt constantly, questioning if I was capable of more than barely keeping my head above water. I encountered subtle sexism, clients assuming I didn't know finance because of my age or gender, colleagues undermining me behind closed doors. But I learned to move gracefully through it, letting my results speak louder than anyone's assumptions. Slowly, the wins came. My first big client was a local tech startup, impressed not only by my strategy but by my tenacity. The first profitable contract felt like a personal victory over every setback I had endured. Each paycheck I earned, each satisfied client, rebuilt not just my bank account but my confidence. By the time I turned 26, I was quietly profitable, fully independent, and entirely self-reliant. I never broadcasted my success. My social media posts remained modest, carefully curated to avoid attention. I didn't want my family or the world to know the extent of my rebound. Every day, I reminded myself that my achievements were mine alone, earned through blood, sweat, and resilience. No one had a claim on my independence, not even her. Yet, despite the success, there was always a quiet ache, a shadow left by the betrayal that had lit the fire in me. I carried that pain like a talisman, a reminder that I had survived, that I had taken a devastating loss and transformed it into fuel. The bracelet from my grandmother still rested on my wrist, its silver links catching the light during long nights at my desk. It was a small, unspoken promise. Whatever came next, I would not just endure it, I would rise above it. The knock on my office door was firm but hesitant, the kind that carries the weight of expectation and fear. I looked up from my laptop, the soft glow of my dual monitors reflecting off the polished glass of the Chicago skyline behind me. "Come in," I said, my voice calm, steady, the way it always sounded when I had full control. And there she was, Patricia, my mother, older, sharper lines around her eyes, her carefully styled hair still immaculate, but there was a flicker of something she hadn't prepared for, recognition. Or maybe it was the realization that she had walked into a room she no longer owned. Alongside her were a few of the relatives who had once whispered about my reckless ambition and my failure to keep family together. Their eyes flickered over my surroundings, taking in the minimalist elegance of my office, the sleek mahogany desk, abstract paintings I had hand-selected, awards and framed articles that quietly proclaimed my rise. They expected the same nervous, young woman they had abandoned years ago, the girl who had left her inheritance in their hands and been burned by it. But that girl was gone. What they faced now was Olivia Carter, CEO of a thriving financial consultancy, quietly successful, fiercely independent, and untouchable. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands across my lap, and let the silence stretch. They studied me, hesitant, their breaths uneven. Finally, I spoke, soft but unwavering. "I see you've come to discuss the loans." I let my words hang. Their faces shifted, confusion and fear battling the remnants of arrogance. I rose and walked slowly around the room, letting them absorb the subtle details they had overlooked, the awards lining the shelves, the clean, uncluttered workspace that spoke of discipline, the framed article announcing my firm's acquisition of a major tech client. "You thought you could ruin me," I said, stopping in front of the floor-to-ceiling window that framed the city below, "and I suppose part of you expected me to crumble. That I would need rescuing. That I would beg." Their mouths opened, closed, searching for words that didn't exist. Patricia's hand twitched at her side, betraying her calm facade. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carries both empathy and steel. "Instead," I continued, "I rebuilt everything. The money, the trust, my life, every piece of it, without anyone's help. And now, you are here, standing in the office of the person you tried to destroy." I let the words sink in. Eyes widened, shoulders stiffened. They weren't seeing the girl they remembered. They were seeing a woman who had turned betrayal into power. I returned to my chair and gestured to the visitor chairs across from me. "Sit. Let's talk about what comes next, because this time, the rules are mine." They hesitated, unsure whether this was a negotiation or a reckoning. I felt no rush, no need to persuade them. The truth had weight, and in that room, my truth was absolute. The contracts, the accounts, the clients, they were all mine, and they all spoke louder than any argument Patricia could muster. For a moment, they simply stared, and I allowed myself a quiet satisfaction. This was the reversal I had imagined through sleepless nights and tear-stained journals. They had expected weakness. What they found instead was a woman forged in betrayal, tempered in perseverance, and radiant in the quiet, undeniable glow of hard-won success. Across from me, the once commanding presence reduced to unease. The relatives hovered like shadows, unsure if they were welcome or being judged. For the first time in years, the power dynamic was no longer theirs, it was mine. I took a slow breath, letting my voice carry both authority and measured compassion. "You want help?" I began, "but help comes with conditions. I'm not here to repeat the past, and I'm not here to hand over solutions without accountability." Their eyes widened, some with fear, some with disbelief. I let them sit in that uncertainty a moment longer, savoring the clarity of my control. "First," I said, locking eyes with my mother, "you will repay every dollar that was forged in my name. Not because I need it, but because integrity matters. If you are unwilling to face the truth of what you did, you cannot be trusted around my life or anyone else's." She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "No excuses. No rationalizations. This is about honesty. About proving you can take responsibility instead of repeating the mistakes that cost me years of stability." I turned to the rest of the family. "For anyone who wishes to be part of my life going forward, you'll confront your toxic patterns. No more judgment, no more sabotage, no more undermining someone else's hard work for your comfort. Pursue your dreams responsibly. Attend counseling if you must. Show that you can grow into the people you claim to want to be." The weight of my words settled in the room. I could see the shame in Patricia's eyes, the hesitation in my aunt's, the fear in my cousin's. Yet underneath all of it, I sensed the first flickers of reflection, the beginnings of transformation. I leaned forward slightly, letting a softer note enter my tone. "I'm not cruel. I'm not here to punish. I care about you all, but my care has limits. My boundaries are absolute. If you meet them, you have a chance to rebuild trust with me. If not, I let the sentence trail, leaving it unspoken but fully understood." The bracelet on my wrist caught the morning light, and I ran my thumb over its silver links. It had seen me through loss, fear, and betrayal. Now it witnessed my strength, my resilience, and my ability to wield justice without malice. "This," I said quietly, "is how you honor those you hurt. Not by pleading for forgiveness, but by doing the work to prove you've changed." The room shifted. Shoulders straightened, eyes lowered in contemplation. The people who once controlled me now held themselves accountable, or, at least, were forced to confront the fact that they must. And in that shift, I felt a quiet surge of satisfaction. I was not only protecting myself, but offering them a chance to evolve, a chance they would never have had if I had remained the same vulnerable girl I once was. For the first time in years, I felt fully untouchable. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I had claimed my power, defined my boundaries, and ensured that my life could never again be dictated by someone else's betrayal. Months passed after the confrontation, and change rippled through the people who had once tried to control me. Patricia attended therapy, visibly wrestling with the choices that had cost me my trust. Some of the relatives began pursuing careers or education they had long postponed, cautiously testing the boundaries I had set. And while I remained vigilant, I watched quietly, feeling a strange mix of pride and relief. The world I had fought to reclaim was finally stable, not because I forced it, but because I refused to settle for anything less. I often caught myself in moments of reflection, seated in my office with the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass. I remembered the girl who had handed over $72,000 with trembling hands, trusting blindly. I remembered the fear, the humiliation, the nights spent staring at ceiling cracks, wondering if I would ever breathe freely again. And now, as Olivia Carter, I held my head high, my life a testament to resilience and quiet strength. The bracelet my grandmother had given me sat on my wrist, worn smooth by years of wear. I traced its silver links, thinking about her words. Never trust love that costs you your peace. Once it had felt like a warning. Now it was a reminder. Not of betrayal, but of survival, of the woman I had become, because I refused to be broken. I allowed myself a small smile, a rare moment of softness amidst the clarity of my accomplishments. My office, my clients, my financial empire, they were mine. I had transformed betrayal into a foundation, fear into fuel, and doubt into proof of my perseverance. The people around me were no longer threats or anchors. They were reflections of lessons learned, some embraced, some still in progress. Standing by the window, I breathed in the crisp morning air and let the sunlight warm my face. I had turned the pain into power, the loss into a stepping stone, and the betrayal into an unshakable sense of self. And in that quiet, shining moment, I whispered, almost to myself, almost to the universe, she took my money, but she could never take me. I built everything she tried to steal, and nothing, not even her, can ever touch that again.